Alrighty, hello there every folks. So usually I don't start off with like a whole pre-intro to the intro thing here, but there's a few things that I noticed that I missed when going back and kind of looking over this whole Ramble review thing here, and wanted to throw them kind of out front here, so to speak. So one thing I want to point out right from the get-go, triangle strategy is effectively, if you loved New Vegas, and then you went and you played Outer Worlds, it's a very similar experience to that, where it's very clearly like a love letter to, I would say, primarily Tactics Ogre, but a lot of things from the genre as a whole. Um, but uh, but basically, after the beginning, after the first half, hell, maybe even after the first third, stuff starts falling right the hell apart. You start seeing writing just falling by the wayside. You start seeing logic go flying straight out the window. You just start seeing a lot of things showing up stranger and stranger, like they just ran out of budget, like they had all these ideas to keep everything going, just like the intro, and then the money guys showed up and started beating people with sticks. That kind of situation. That that all said, though, it sounds like I'm getting really negative on it. There are a lot of cool ideas that they actually put in, and I feel like I definitely didn't cover those enough in the ramble. So for one thing, the way that they handled the TP system, very solid for the limited number of things that are going on in the game. I'm not sure that it would work in many other contexts, but it is a very solid way that they put that together. It's kind of cool to see, casters effectively getting tired after one or two things and having to go take a break. It feels good. It's got a nice flow. There's a nice, like kind of rotating the lines kind of energy going on. So I like that. You get to see a lot of maps before you actually go into them properly, so you explore around the entire map. You're basically told, okay, we're probably going to have an ambush over here, so maybe go figure out the lay of the land. That kind of stuff is pretty cool. I want to say it's unique. Like, I want to say that Shining Force started off with all that kind of stuff, but still, it's handled nicely here. The downside is, and I'll mention this in the ramble later, but it's not really downtime. There's no downtime in this game. There's no time to just chill out and experience the atmosphere, so to speak. Yeah, they end up hand waving a whole bunch of logical stuff that makes no sense. As I've been going through more of the quote-unquote golden ending to this thing, I've started noticing that there's a lot more dialogue, and it's almost like they got to the very end of the thing, and at that point they started writing the dialogue backwards, because there's a bunch of character interactions there, but there's also a bunch that you don't get later that you'd think you would, so that's kind of bizarre. And yeah, you definitely see a lot of cases where there were, cut corners. Again, we'll get to that later. That said, yeah, there are some issues with the ending. Like I said it's a lot like Tactics Ogre there, but when it comes to the endings, there's nothing there. It just sort of drops an ending on you, and that's it. There's barely any kind of post-ending stuff, and I've heard the golden ending has even less of that. Again, apparently there was cut content for the golden ending showing, the main two having a kid and everything else, but apparently they just kind of threw all that out for some reason. There's all kinds of just there's a lot of cases where it just feels like stuff just abruptly stops, and again, those endings are definitely part of it. I was happy with the one that I got initially because it kind of made sense, because literally the option was to frickin' bail. So, that's perfectly fine with pretty much only one character getting an ending there. But yeah, upon looking into it, apparently in pretty much all of them, there's almost nothing that actually happens after the ending picture. And yeah. One cool thing, though, is that whenever there are lines for characters, they seem to almost always show up on the recommended list for different fights, so at least that's a nice thing. For example, I never would have figured there's any connection between one of the last bosses and the guy that I later referred to as the Math Tub. Weird connection. It doesn't really do anything, but whatever. I guess it makes sense, sure. And yeah, that's about it. I feel like for a lot of things, it's a good game. It would be, in context, a way better game if a lot of other games didn't do pretty much every feature of it better in different ways. It's a nice overall package there, but Yeah, it's. I kind of wanted to do a lot of this spoiler review because I saw a whole lot of heaped on praise thrown its way, and it's actually the same thing that kind of started to bug me about FFT over the years too, where they're like, "This is unique. It did everything, perfectly. Here's this stuff that nobody's ever done before. The most revolutionary thing in the world." And it's like, give credit where credit's due, but that's a load of crap. Anyway, so on to the ramble now. That's about all I had to say on that one for now. I mean, actually, one final note. I saw a whole lot of people mentioning how crazy Square's going over the HD 2D thing right now. Look, this may be a personal opinion, but, I think this looks a lot better and has aged a lot better and just, hell, overall looks, sounds, and plays nicer. And this is, going on 12 years old now? But again, personal opinions vary. I don't really see the too big of a benefit for actual full 3D type stuff. Unless you're actually going to do more with the overall terrain and things like that. For example, for XCOM 2, made a ton of sense. You have completely destructible environments. You can do all kinds of stupid nonsense, you have that guy punch a structural beam that's holding that building down that's going to drop that guy onto those fuel canisters where you've got a bunch of claymores situated, and suddenly that boss just became a giant fireball. That, beautiful. For Triangle, it really would have been just fine with these kinds of maps. I mean, it sometimes looks pretty, but again, I think this looks prettier. I think it looks more striking. There's a lot more detail. Stuff occasionally does look pretty washed out, but either way, I'm getting ahead of myself here. Again, onto the ramble. Have yourselves a good one, and yeah, take care. Okay, fine. Fair enough, whatever. You're just getting people back on the plot railroad. There's definitely a lot of railroading as far as this plot goes, unfortunately. If you ever got annoyed at that moment in in Tactics Ogre where Casual leaves to go make the plot happen, it's like every other decision works exactly that way, because most of the decisions, even when you're looking at the golden ending and stuff like that, most of the decisions don't even matter. You'll get some flavor differences, but overall it won't actually change the impact of anything. The whole morality, utility, whatever system, it gives you a few extra points. It'll occasionally change the way people view you in conversations, but it won't actually do much beyond that. You can eventually pretty much convince everybody to see it your way anyway, and you really only have to convince about 2 out of the 7 most of the time, because most of the time it'll be a split vote no matter what you decide, so, it's kind of whatever. Also, I love the logic right here. He's turned on an ability that allows him to be invincible as long as he doesn't take his next turn. So, she stops him, so he is now invincible until that stop wears off. Neat. Anyway, moving on. There's a lot of cool builds in it. There's a lot of cool characters. Again, the writing is very spotty. Again, the Pink faction has hurt the worst there because it feels like a lot of their stuff was cut. I'll get back. I'm sorry. I know I'm speaking kind of disjointed. I can't even tell you how many takes I've taken of this. I constantly get confused on it. Oh, by the way, the music kind of turns all cool and rocky if you're doing well. Anyway, alrighty. Hello, every folks, and finally, welcome to the spoiler review. This is the the one that I actually wanted to get to this whole time here, because, well, there's really no way to actually talk about this thing without getting into spoilers, because, quite frankly, everything is a dang spoiler when trying to talk about this thing. So, I will say right off the bat, I don't think that having anything spoiled about this game actually, well, spoils a dang thing about it. Reason being, it's a bit like Armored Core. I mentioned this before, but, just because you know something will happen doesn't really ruin it for you. If anything, it might make it more interesting in this particular context. For example, right here, you see all these guys, the guys that are totally not the Byzantines. They're the Byzantines. That's fine. It's completely distinct. Anyway, if, for example, I told you they worshipped a machine god, would that make you more interested in their faction or less? Exactly. I haven't seen that thing either. It's apparently in the fight after this. So yeah, there's a lot to potentially unpack about a lot of different things. let's just go ahead and go over to the camp thing to start getting going on it. So I'm going to assume you've probably seen the first review, but just as a quick refresher for anyone who hasn't seen it, the long and short of this game is the writing is just a total crapshoot. Like, I'm gonna be referring to three groups of writing kind of going forward here. So the A team is kind of going to be your main character. So that's this guy right here, as well as here. Let's just pull up the roster and I'll show you who I'm talking about. So you got your main character here. I call him Mr. Stark. He is basically exactly meant to be one of the Stark kids from Game of Thrones, more or less. You can tell that from the visuals. You can tell that by the way they talk. Actually, the entirety of the beginning of the game is basically a straight-up parody of Game of Thrones Season 1, like pretty much nailing every little dot along the way there. Your kind of secondary protag here is this douchebag. He's the first spear unit you get in the game, and one of only two that you get. I hate this guy, but the long and short of it is, yeah, he's like the standard, rebellious princely type, but the dude's like a Ken doll with somehow less IQ. And then you got this one, who I like to call Hot Wife. They're your pyromancer main character's fiancée lady. And the three of them are basically representing the three kind of main paths that the story takes. Rest of the cast here, you got this guy who's the kind of like old-timer strategist sort. I do appreciate that when they give you your, obligatory old-timey veteran character at the start of the game, it is a guy that's basically just there giving advice, like looking at his skills and everything else. The guy's pretty reasonably durable, but for the most part, he's never going to be there for offense. He can boost other people's offense, but yeah, pretty much everything he ever does is buffs. So, really appreciated that one. And you can actually still do some cool stuff with this guy, by the way. There was actually one case where he was the last one left on the map and was just abusing this double turn move over here to repeatedly have him run up and down a ladder because the AI couldn't figure out how to get down a ladder. So, he just kept, like, running up, cutting the guy, using his second turn to run back down. Yeah, it's weird. And by the way, on hard mode, at least, I haven't tested this on normal. Both runs that I've done have been on hard. But yeah, I mentioned this move in particular because like the any of the rogue characters in the later game just have this activated full time. It's total BS. Anyway, moving on here. So yeah, you got your old timer guy. You got your spy character who has kind of like a weaker version of that same, like, taking two turns a thing. They can just basically act twice, but they can't move twice. You got your healer, who's, like, her teacher, more or less. You got your scout, who is going to be there to help you cheese the entire game for any parts that you can't get yourself out of, because you stick her on top of a roof, and the AI is too stupid to figure out how to get to her. And you got this guy, who is a tank that is very good in the early game, functionally tissue paper around the middle of the game, and then finally goes circling back to being useful again after you get all of his upgrades. So that is your kind of core team. These are the ones that are going to be there for all of your decision making. Those are the kind of main party. Those are the ones that, for the most part, are pretty well written. Now, when I'm talking about the writing on this one, when I say Team 1, that's going to be them. Team 2 is going to be the guys that you normally find in your encampment here. So this is going to be your barkeeper lady over here. You got your smith guy over here, who, by the way, if we go ahead and look at him in the roster, dang it, I'm not used to using these controllers just all like willy-nilly out and about. Kind of getting used to that. Yeah, tell me that's not denim. And he's jeans, it's funny. You may notice, as we go forward here, I do have the voices turned off. That's because they suck, and I'm not about to listen to the good voices in Japanese, so screw it. Anyway, so yeah, you got your smith guy, you got your merchant guy. This is the one that I referred to in the other review as just the asshole. And this is your old-timer. Your old-timer kind of like, they call it the kudos shop. Everything about this place feels like it was modeled after a Souls game, because you got your obligatory upgrade blacksmith, you got your basic shop. You do get different shops in different locations that you show up in, so that's pretty cool. They call it the itinerant merchant, but basically there's just randomly a merchant that's out and about, so you can get some items that you normally can't get from your provisioner. And then you got this guy who throughout the game will just give you stuff like this. You get kudos, which are just like little perk points you get every time you do something. I think like the XCOM 2's XCOM points, it's similar to that. Like you do a backstab, you do a counter, whatever else. The most expensive thing in here is 500. You don't get too much new in New Game Plus. He actually only restocked one time in New Game Plus, so that's weird. But he's got some books in here. He's got like a few random items here and there. Mostly he's there for your upgrade items and giving you your Quietus dealies, which are these kind of like, I don't want to call them interrupt abilities. It's kind of like if you combined... Okay, I'll just show you the full list of them in a moment, but it's like some of them feel like they came straight from Banner Saga, some of them feel like they came from Valkyria Chronicles, some of them feel like they came from Ogre Battle. Like, you get a whole bunch of weird little one-off things, but your maximum points are 5. They each go on a range of 1 to 4 for how much they take. You can use each of them once. You can't really get too terribly carried away with using them because, again, one-time use. So yeah, but they're there as a nice little bonus. And then, yeah, you got your scouting information that shows up in New Game Plus here. You got your promotions, which I think everybody on the team's promoted at this point. I've got everybody but 2 characters for the roster. The last 2, by the way, are the Princess Lady, who I don't plan to get, and the Thief Girl that I don't plan to get, mostly because they require entire new playthroughs just to get those 2 characters, and quite frankly, I do not give a crap. Anyway, so those are your B team, and then the C team for writing is every frickin' body else. Well, with exception to her, she can kind of be counted as part of the A team. Okay. By the way, spoiler. Yeah, she joins your team eventually. If you were ever curious over how many friggin' like Tactics Ogre references there are, look at her right here. Okay. Her main personality type is just, she's like the one lady general in their army, all stubborn and everything, happens to have a really big hitting but self-damaging attack. Also, if we look at them over in the roster in their final getup, right over here, who does that end up looking like? So, I feel like they're meant to be Margaret from Night of Lotus. Again, it might be something else, but just everything combined definitely speaks that way. I'll show you a few pictures here in a moment, but because I wanted to go over the first couple playthroughs as part of this whole spoiler section. But you've actually got Clotho from KOL over on this dude right here. So basically, Flash of Steel just shoots out a giant blue dragon. Pretty much exactly the same dang thing. Like other Tactics Ogre references, this guy, when he eventually decides to join you, like, your encampment people are just nameless whatevers until you listen to their story, and then they become part of your team. That guy is pretty much straight up a Tactics Ogre remake archer. Starts off with 3 movement, has a big aerial bombardment move, chance to suddenly insta-kill somebody at less than half health. I know that's not a direct reference, but it certainly feels like how they felt like they worked in TO. There he is. I will say this UI, it's alright in the early game. Once you get into the later game, trying to find somebody is irritating. You can sort them through different things, but you can't just number them in the order that you want to keep them, and that just kind of irritates me. Anyway, so yeah, Inescapable Arrow, here it is right here. This is one of those things that you can just cheese the hell out of the game with. You just have this guy hide on the other edge of the map, and yeah, 12 tiles away, just go ahead and aerial bombard somebody. So I like to call him geriatric artillery. Any dangways. So, what was I getting at with the writing? Why am I mentioning these 3 teams before I get even more off topic here? The core team is pretty well written. They're pretty competently written. Generally speaking, their scenes make sense. The B team is there to support everybody. Like, for example, this guy right here ends up eventually asking for a job from these other 2 over here. Now, you know, that's pretty much the only time I've seen them interact, but whatever. Occasionally, the encampment team is used to flesh out other people's stories. But the C team, pretty much most of their writing is tropey as hell. Their stories are never actually finished. Like, for example, these 2 right here, these 2, standing a few feet away from each other, they have been looking for each other for 30 years. They distinctly point out that they were generals on opposite sides. wearing opposite colors. And, you know, they're just right here. They're right next to each other. Their story never concludes. And, yeah. Anyway, kind of randomly also Souls-like, by the way. You may have noticed some of the lines they're giving. They do get different lines every time that you upgrade them to a certain point, so that's kind of whatever. Other than that, they just sort of awkwardly stand around. And this, I feel, pretty comfortably encapsulates a lot of the weirdness of this game. The fights are excellent. Like, that, once the fights get going, once everything's all balanced out, I'll get to that in a moment, they feel excellent. But there's a lot of stuff where it feels like their schedule got cut short, or they had to release early, or whatever else. Like, you'd think these guys would be wandering around. Again, Fell Seal gets crap for its presentation sometimes, but you see the camp in the cutscenes, and there's people wandering around making soup, or patrolling, or whatever else. These guys will never move. I mean, it looks fine, whatever, but it just kind of always feels like a ghost town when you go in here. So it's like there's just all these statues that want to be people. Anyway, let's talk more about writing and things. So it's actually confirmed at this point that, yeah, there was a bunch of cut content. There were a bunch of routes that they had to cut out. There were a bunch of decisions that they had to cut out. And I'm assuming that's why there are so dang many fights that show up at the bar here. So at the bar, you have the quote-unquote mental mock battles. And you just got a ton of these dang things. And these are... on the surface, they seem like they're just basic grind fights. And I'll tell you what. There's no point in grinding almost any of them except for this one right here. You get to it, you get 12 grand, plus one of them can drop 9 grand, plus you get materials off of every unit that you kill off before you go and squish the easy boss that's in here. Simple, easy, you know, nothing really to discuss there. And if you ever have any sort of issues, you just go in here and you go and you collect. How are they getting all of these resources? By essentially getting drunk at a bar? I'm not sure we want to know, but, you know, that's kind of your grinding situation here. But you do get some cool scenarios in here, and why I say that they feel like there's stuff that was cut from other routes that they couldn't quite put in there. Like, for example, right here, you know, you're stuck in the middle of a garden, and you basically just have to deal with a bunch of close-range fighting now, and that's whatever. In this one, there's a fort that has to be overrun in a short amount of time. Actually, an interesting thing, the barricades on the right side, for whatever reason, don't block you. Weird bug, but whatever. Actually, yesterday I had a situation where I accidentally made the main character turn invisible. It's weird how a game can be so polished and unpolished at the same time, but whatever. I got other cases like right here where you're just completely surrounded. You actually have several takes of this fight in particular, and there actually were meant to be additional fights in this particular village, wherein you have a bunch of different choices, and there's just a certain point where on my first playthrough I was like, why do I not get more choices here? It feels like this is just, you know, going wherever the hell it wants to go. I felt like it completely took away choice my first time through, and it turns out that's why. There actually was supposed to be more stuff there, and it just got cut. Or right here, you got one person that's stuck far away, or you got this one where you got more stuff with the minecarts. There's a lot of stuff with the minecarts. You got one fight right here where you have to survive 100 rounds against infinite enemies. Which, by the way, cool thing on the infinite rounds, it's not turn rounds or whatever else, it's just how many unit turns you take. And in case you're wondering, yeah, you do have an invisible unit that's totally untargetable, and yeah, you absolutely can just turn them invisible for 100 turns and win that with no trouble whatsoever. Oh well. You also can just put your flying scout on the roof and just have her overwatch everybody for that entire time for free experience. I don't know what you're talking about. I totally didn't do that. Anyway, so you may have picked up on a bit of a theme here that the AI is pretty dumb. And that's the thing. They have good AI in the game. They don't use it for most of the game for some reason. The reason that I have it on this fight, aside from the fact that I meant to finish New Game Plus and everything else before actually getting this out, and then I finally had an opening, was the fact that it's actually a pretty good example of the AI actually being good. In so many maps, you can potentially just do nothing. You turn one of your characters invisible, like you have your Anna right here. You start the game with them. They never leave your party. You have them turn invisible. Every 2 turns, you have them stab somebody in the back and turn invisible again. You just rinse and repeat until the AI completely breaks. The healers just forget to heal. The casters forget what they're up to. Everybody else just stands in place. It will eventually break. It feels like all of them have scripting to go after certain units. Like, I feel in some of them there was probably supposed to be a kill condition for this guy, and instead he just gets a knockout cutscene, and then the AI just falls apart. So yeah, it definitely feels like they probably had more scripting in there at some point, because there's so many cases where they will clearly gravitate to a certain point in the map and then just die. And, like, a lot of SRPGs have that, especially if they have more complicated mechanics. Like, if you ever leave your party on only AI in, like, Tactics Ogre or something like that, and Tynemouth Hill specifically, they will get stuck in the middle of the map and keep getting sniped from the edges and not know what to do, because their aggro range is not very far. In this case, the aggro range, as far as I can tell, is about 8 tiles, for most of the AI in the game. This is a little bit abusable when you have, for example, characters that can hit the entire map or can attack from 12 tiles away, or the most consistent use of this, you have the math tub. This guy is basically your calculator, but they actually bothered balancing it for once. Again, feels like there was supposed to be more to this guy, because his whole thing is just yeah, you get multiples of 3, 4, and 5. 3 and 4 just do damage. 5 also has a chance to insta-kill everybody at a rate of 10 or 11%. You have a thing that's just a buff for everybody that doesn't have any TP on them at the moment. And you have another one that targets 5+, that's, despite a higher number, seemingly always worse than 3 and 4. I don't know. And then you got target, which just, this one is just anybody with numbers ending in 7, and it just dumps their entire bar. As far as high damage systems and everything else go, I guess I kind of like it. Most characters have a TP dump ability. Like, for example, this guy, he has a defense ignoring kind of stab. This guy can make 5 people invincible. She can make a giant fireball, which is functionally entirely worthless on hard mode, by the way. That's some very basic coffee. Anyway, so yeah, her fireball is entirely worthless on hard mode, simply because it doesn't, like, its main thing is scaling, and it does not get a chance to scale, and its AoE is much bigger, but you also have to take a turn to charge it. So as far as FFT comparisons, this is one of them. So she has a charge move. There's only like a handful of characters that actually have charge moves. But like in her case, yeah, it's just a big old, like, think of like tier 4 abilities in Tactics Ogre, except you got to take an entire turn to charge them, and then they lose a turn after that, more or less, because that second turn is just spent on casting it. They don't get to act. So that's, yeah. In her case, she gets a re-raise. That's a teacher mom here. For Spy Lady, she gets a big single hit ability that also acts as a debuff. Again, completely worthless in hard mode. If it was 2 points, maybe. But there's, yeah, it's so bad. Anyway, you got Scout Lady, who has this shooting star thing, which just basically allows her to snipe from long range too. This is what I was talking about, a Overwatch ability. If you think like Sentinel or Killzone, kind of like a middle ground between those from XCOM, that's what Sight Set is. It's just in like Overwatch radius, but it'll fire at anybody within there at a slightly lower damage. It's pretty good. Pretty solid. I thought it was pretty worthless at first, and then found a lot of utility for it over time. That is one thing I've been noticing, that there's pretty much utility to everything, but there's so many characters, you're going to find something you like. Got this guy that's probably got the best move in the game right here. Just makes him entirely invincible to absolutely everything, and has a guaranteed chance to piss off everybody within 2 tiles, which more or less means you send him into the front, you have him turn on this ability, and then, for example, in like this map that's coming up here, that can lead to a situation where they have a mage that can stop him in time, making him permanently invisible, serving as a magnet for every character that's in the front, while you repeatedly bombard them with AoEs. So, you know, that kind of stuff is fun. You got this guy that I was talking about was basically a Green Arrow cosplayer because, yeah, he's got the sweet compound bow. He gets a more and more of a hoodie situation as time goes on, trick arrows, that kind of thing. I know at this point we're just reviewing characters, whatever. You got stuff like your Icy Wizard guy here, who's seemingly the total opposite of Hot Wife back there. Best thing on him, can turn somebody invisible and their invisibility shield explodes on somebody and it hurts real good, so that's nice. Alright, so I should probably mention by this point, you may notice with all of these characters that I'm going over, I think I should also start mentioning how many lines of dialogue they actually get throughout the entire story, because they kind of seemingly implied, you know, a lot of it's going to be about the characters and whatever else, and all this talking they're going to do. And this is one of those moments where stuff seems weird. Like, this guy didn't seem to have any unique dialogue with the guy that gets him out of jail in the early game. Not sure why. Well, actually, no, on this particular route, it's because that guy died. Maybe on one of the other routes he does. This guy had no unique lines for his teacher that's in this upcoming fight here. This guy I like to call Spock. They're just like a general advisor guy. He doesn't need any extra lines. His whole thing is just he throws all of his points on somebody else. So, you know, he's a buff guy, but very, very handy for spamming a bunch of heavy things here. You have this very appropriately dressed lady here. She actually does get extra lines. You can very clearly tell that some of these characters came later in development and some came earlier. Guaranteed charm AoE. Nothing broken about that whatsoever. But yeah, easily one of the better characters there. You'd think with this lady having easily one-shot like 6 units at once a few fights ago that she would be really good. She's basically the Ozma of this game. She has not been terribly good, to be honest. She's alright. Even after her final upgrade, she's kind of a maybe on hard mode. I'm assuming on normal mode she's absolutely busted. But yeah, as of so far, I haven't really been super blown away by this character. But this is pretty neat. If she's the last one standing on your team, she ends up becoming ridiculously good. So easily one of the most exploitable characters, but yeah, risky maneuver, basically the same thing as Atropos from Knight of Lotus, and yeah, moving on. This is the guy I was talking about in the other review as basically being Ivan from Golden Sun, because there's a particular build that you could do for him, probably on accident, that more or less made him the Omni Mage, which is his whole shtick. Like, his whole deal is like, well, I got this guy that taught me a bunch of stuff, but I guess he got written out of history or something, so, eh. And yeah, he's just kind of off in the background, but yeah, he just gets everything. He can heal, he can do the zappies, he can do the frosties, he can do the laser beam that does everything at once. He's literally got a hyper beam that heals. Neat character, probably one of the better ones. Pretty much got the same thing as Extend from TO as well. So very long range on that one, especially handy with something like Whirlwind here, so just basically can cover, I think, like 14 something tiles or whatever with a tornado, so that's kind of neat. But going back to how many lines of dialogue they had, okay? She got dialogue. She's had one cutscene where she's had a little bit of extra dialogue. Alright, fair enough. You get her late in the game, you can only get her on this route. Fine, whatever. This guy, literally, we're currently in the story, we're invading the place that erased his mentor, more or less. Hasn't had a single line to say. You've got this lady, she works here. She has not had a single line of dialogue aside from her individual cutscenes. This guy works here, so whatever. This guy, I was surprised because he doesn't have any cutscenes or dialogue whatever with his teacher that is a big part of or with his student, rather. That's kind of a big part of the story. Actually, there's even a boss fight against this lady earlier, where you can bring him in, and she's like, oh man, the dude I killed, how was he alive? But it's not him. She's talking to somebody else wearing his hat. You can bring him up to her. She's got nothing to say about it. Now, bear in mind, in some cases, that it isn't like the Tactics Ogre Time Paradox situation where, you have multiple of the same person in one place. No, they will specifically block you from bringing in units that are participating in the fight. So it's not like they were just a generic that was looking like them. Like, no, that's actually them. Canonically, somehow it all just sort of happens in the background. I don't freaking know. Anyway, yeah, this guy is looking for Kung Fu Lady. The two of them never talk. This guy is also one of the generals or whatever else. He's just kind of an extra. I don't know. He doesn't have a line with anybody. She can control the weather. That comes up in a cutscene. They can canonically do that. They can make the crops happen. They have a cutscene where they save the crops. Nobody cares about this ability, and they hate them for some reason. Math Tub. Functionally portable, invisible artillery. He's thrown away as trash. Sure. Can buy that. This guy, he's the kid of the one that we're in a boss fight with in the background here. They have one line of dialogue. They don't actually confirm that they're a kid or not. She's just like, why is there a kid here? Well, that's stupid. And that's it. It's like, you're not going to have any more conversation? Anyway. Yada, 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 yada. There's a lot of characters. Moving on. Actually, yeah, this is the clown I was talking about. That's basically the XCOM meme beacon. She falls off hard. Like, middle of the game, very, very good unit. Later in the game, kind of terrible unit. And actually, even later than that, if you want to do a no-deaths run, you can't even use her decoy, because apparently that counts as a death. Very, very strange decision there. Very interesting Geomancer here. Apparently all of her items got taken off at some point, but yeah, this lady is like a Geomancer who doesn't really work on a lot of terrain. Actually, most terrain she doesn't work on. Like, going down the list here, yeah, trekking for TP just basically means if you walk a bunch, you get your bar filled. Yeah, grass and wheat fields. That doesn't mean all grass, by the way. That just means like tall grass and wheat fields. Those are not very common. Water, common enough, but it's like a weak heal move for some reason. But yeah, you get all of their stuff seems pretty weak on paper. The idea is that the higher their bar is charged, the better they do. Only this one have I actually been able to consistently use, because it doesn't work on very particular stuff. Like, for example, molten iron or tiles that are set ablaze, which basically means that you have this grass from earlier, or wheat fields, and you had to have set them on fire. So that's probably not going to happen. You even have abilities that specifically say that they will set a tile on fire, but they won't actually set that tile on fire. It's only if that tile is actually flammable. It's very, very, very situational. Like, for example, a bunch of snow on a pathway does not count as deep snow or frozen tiles for some reason. Anyway, alrighty. Oh, actually, okay, one too far there. So I wanted to quickly go through and kind of go through my first couple runs of this thing to give you a better idea, to more properly spoil this whole experience, without actually completely ruining the whole experience. Because yeah, the whole way through I was just taking screenshots and whatever else. I love this little screenshot function, by the way. But just kind of wanted to look at notable moments, cool features, whatever else that I found along the way, stupid moments of writing, all that kind of thing. So okay. First things first, this was the first time that I kind of appreciated the terrain mechanics here. So there was a case where somebody got hit by a icy breath there, which 5-tile AoE ice thing froze the ground, which meant that guy suddenly couldn't jump up on those tiles anymore. So kind of neat moment there. He got completely stuck on the bottom because it just happened to get frozen on both sides, kind of like that right there, because they kept getting bombarded with all kinds of icy nonsense. Actually, as a bit of a side note, I do appreciate the pun names here. The Ace Frosty, the Is Frosty, the It's Frosty over there in the frigid north. They're basically the snow Russians. Well, I mean, just the Russians then. They're like, if you combined every bad empire trope with, Russian stereotypes, that's more or less who they are. You got the Byzantians / Byzantians / whatever, just encompassing all the weird religious empire stuff on the other side. And kind of your third main faction going through it is combining every minority stereotype you've ever heard, and it is very unfortunate. because their writing doesn't really back it up, and it hurts just like reading their plotline. Anyway, moving on. So yeah, stuff looks pretty, effects look pretty, all that kind of thing. Um, this shot actually annoyed me at first. Like, you notice the guy with the arrow in his back, because they actually do make a pretty decent point for most of the game, making sure that when a character does something in a cutscene, that they can actually do it in game, mostly. The interesting thing is here, the random soldier that takes this particular shot can't actually have made that shot. Later on, NPCs do get a range boost, but there's only one character in the game who could have made that shot, and he's the old guy in your camp. So anyway, that it's like the one of the only exceptions where this was the case. Like, even you may have noticed the Maxwell guy, the one that dies in the demo. His last ability is the ability to instantly revive once per turn. So they do always have that. His stupid anime jump nonsense, he can do that as one of his abilities too. They generally make a pretty good point of that. But as you can see here, this was like a 12 tile shot. They couldn't have done that. So she flies around and does an impossible shot on him, basically exactly pulling what they did in FFT with that crossbow shot that could never have happened. This scene was kind of cool, though they don't even try to fight back, unfortunately. And I'm pretty sure the reason for that is because the game barely runs on the Switch as it is. Like, it usually runs pretty smooth, but it does get lag spikes, especially if you put it into sleep mode and then turn it back on. It will lag like like crazy. But yeah, like some of the abilities just straight up want to crash the game sometimes. It hasn't actually crashed, but you can tell it's struggling. So yeah, in this one, it was just like an awkward fight scene where they're doing this whole invasion thing, but everyone's kind of awkwardly shuffling in. Again, sad to say, Game Boy Advance Night of Lotus did that part better, but overall the scene was pretty reasonable. A little bit annoyed by the fact that there's just onlookers staring at this and the archers aren't even trying to fire. It was cool to see the the sort of chess pieces moving around the board there. Combo attacks, that was pretty fun. This poor bastard was getting beaten to hell by the healers. You might be wondering why I started these pictures here in the in like kind of several chapters into the game, and this is mostly because I had started off with the demo, and yeah, I just wasn't taking pictures during the demo because I thought you'd have to restart it all from scratch. Apparently that wasn't the case. You get right up to the mines for the first time, and that's when it lets you start off the thing proper. This was one of those times where I kind of really started getting into how the traps were working and everything else, because this one guy was able to keep 3 guys tied up with no real issue. And I was able to consistently do that. So this is actually a pretty good example that for urban maps and stuff like that, you do get some pretty large maps. You get a lot of verticality to them. You get some props in there every now and then. You do see, a lot of potential use out of cover and things like that. You can actually hide behind cover to avoid archers and things like that. They're not the biggest threat, though, like especially later on, but, it's just cool that it works. Very... in terms of if you really want to combine something with FFT, they definitely did take the blood pool scenes from that pretty seriously. A little bit strange that they seem to bleed out all over the floor, but not the steps. Bridge scene was pretty cool, but yeah, bear traps, ice all over the bridge, that kind of stuff. Just kind of happens to look pretty cool. How on earth this guy manages to get up ladders with a horse is anyone's guess, but actually, I love one of the memes that I saw somebody post up on the Reddit there, pointing out the fact that he will compliment his scout, wishing that he had such a close tie with an animal when she's talking about her bird, and then just like a picture of a horse crying. It's like the poor nameless horse that he never talks about. I don't think he was actually meant to have a horse originally, because he's basically doing that kind of pose or whatever else in most cutscenes. He never has a horse in cutscenes. He just sort of pops a horse out of his butthole. I don't know what that's all about. Anyway, yeah, this guy decided to go jump up on top of a bridge, so there was that. Turns out if you mine the entire bridge, they don't even bother sending reinforcements, which was a little bit disappointing, not gonna lie. As far as side stuff and whatever else, I feel like the accessories were pretty interesting early on, and they gave you a decent number of them early on, and then it just sort of stopped. Like, again, a lot of things around this game, just like, they start off strong, and then it's just like, okay, so where's the rest? Oh. Early on, you got, the golden pinky thing, basically like the covetous gold serpent ring from Dark Souls. Again, it's why I think they did reference a lot of Dark Souls in here. Just like gives you additional drops whenever they kill somebody or whatever else. And later on, you get an experience version for that as well, except they never really do anything else beyond that. It's like you get the Vanguard Scarf, which is an instant free first turn, or you get those experience boosting ones or item drop boosting ones. You get ones that'll prevent somebody from being knocked back, or free regeneration, or a stat boost at the cost of degeneration, or not being able to build up TP but get a stat boost. So there's a bunch of stuff like that. But unfortunately, yeah, it just kind of stops happening partway through the game. And it's weird because I even went back on alternate routes, and there were very few additional unique items. There was just piles of cash everywhere, almost like it was placeholder. It gets especially weird when everyone's talking about how much they're going to save the capital, and then you go in there and you're just ransacking cash out of the drawers. It just feels really weird. So, yeah, the close quarters map was probably my my first favorite grind map going into it, just because you had this little tiny arena. Felt very OB64 on that one. Actually, a lot of the training maps felt very OB64 in my mind. But quick little skirmishes, whatever else, they're pretty fun. I didn't realize at first that you can rotate your view inside the houses, actually, despite the fact that it feels like it's a fixed camera, and they got stuff hidden behind corners and stuff like that. Feels a little inappropriate to be looting people's houses before you burn them down, but whatever, story's gonna story like that. Yeah, and then we get to the fight at the demo. You put down decoys, you deal with all kinds of traps and whatever else, and then ultimately you just sit her on top of a roof and then snipe for pretty much the next 2 hours. Yeah. This went on for quite some time. Interestingly, though, I believe what I was trying to take a picture with here, after a certain point, the experience system in this one is very aggressive. So if you're low level, you'll instantly gain a level. If you're 1 or 2 levels higher, you just gain nothing. Not even 1 after a certain point. I believe at this point she was still 2 levels under the boss, so she was just getting 2. But then I believe once she matched level with her, she just started getting nothing. It's actually not based off what they're targeting either. It's actually intelligently based off the map itself and kind of where they intended you to be. So if the game wants you to be farther, it'll scale you up farther. If it wants you to be lower, it'll make you lower. I feel like they could have just done away with levels altogether, but I guess it's the next best thing, if you want to technically call it an RPG still. Anyway, you may have noticed, by the way, with the inventory system, and I love how they even mention the fact that you can do this in the tooltips. The inventory system they went with is pretty much just a total lift from SteamWorld Heist, but less interesting. So while there are a few unique items and there are a few little buffs here and there, most of it is pretty standard, like resist any of these things, you get a stat boost to these things, and then later on your final stat boosting items also serve as a immunity to something or other. I feel overall, yeah, it kind of goes back to the same thing I said in the first one, where it's just entirely a sampler platter of different stuff from the genre. So they just copied this, that, or the other all over the place, and then just didn't quite go all the way with it. So copied the SteamWorld Heist thing, but then they didn't give you some of the more interesting ones, or they copied the Tactics Ogre kind of general story progression, but then they didn't get around to finishing, they didn't quite flesh it out as much. They tried. There's a note system that gives you a lot of cool things. They did try, to flesh it out, but it's just the writing, for example, in some of the notes felt very kindergarten, to be honest. When somebody's like, "Oh, well, I sure had all my prejudices checked when I went to this place that had the one group that everyone's exclusively prejudiced against." It's it's just so on the nose. There's no subtlety to it. I mean, it just got all the subtlety of a brick to the face, frankly. Anyway, this right here, I was testing whether or not you could use the guaranteed crit thing for the AoE shotgun bow move thing. Turns out you can. Sorry. Disappointingly, in yet another case of Felseal did it better, you can't make crit mages. That would have been amazing, but yeah. To my knowledge, Felseal is one of the only games that lets you make crit mages. So yeah, there's also moments in the story where clearly there should have been moments of a character leaving the party, because you do have cases where characters leave the party. This right here, I've sent her to the next next country over. It's cool. They're just gonna be right there in the next fight. Also, this just kind of cracked me up, because for some reason my dirty mind first read this as, hey, why don't you give your husband some Viagra? But yeah, anyway, what she's trying to say is make him an energy drink. But yeah, most of the character interactions are just like with random generics off in the background. Like this guy right here, his only thing that he ever does is just, this lady's ripping off peasants, so he says something about it. Or, for her backstory, she's like, well, I have this bird. Cool. Or his story, like, I made this guy a weapon. He died, though, so I guess that's my fault. It's like, well, how do you manage to die on a walking path in a peaceful area that's right outside camp? It seems like there was maybe something else involved. I like to think that he just sort of was playing around with it, flipping it around, and just dropped it and donked his head on it on the way down and snapped it. But, apparently good blacksmiths make weapons that never break, because that's a totally realistic standard to aspire to. And yeah, so that's when you get Mr. Jeans, and this was interesting because, again, this was one of those cases where it felt like maybe they were meaning for stuff to show up in a different order, because it says he sets up traps and automatic turrets, which he does, but there's only one type of turret that he sets up. There's only one type of trap that he sets up. But you don't actually get access to the turret until, like, way late in the game. Actually, I wonder if it was meant to be available far earlier, because it's not very strong, at least not in hard. It does have its uses. Like, for example, you set up your Overwatch birdie next to a turret, and then, like, the two of them just spam fire, and that's pretty cool. It's not very strong, but it looks cool. But anyway. This is one of the few cases of the normies in the group actually getting talked to, because this soldier was going to prevent Mr. Omni Wizard from going in, and it's fine. He just healed him, and his whole path is basically he just learns to heal people, even though he already knows how to heal people when you get him. It was interesting to see these two talk. Like, this is one of the few, I would argue, probably the most fleshed out actual couple in the game, despite the fact that the main couple, is pretty good at this. But, like, these two always just talking and, shooting back and forth, so to speak. Actually, the main couple, I have to say, and I know that this isn't a very visual experience so far, but the main couple, I have to say, writing-wise, does feel pretty legit. Like, every time that there's a decision or whatever else, seeing the guy, like, turn to his wife and be like, okay, what will get me in trouble here, does feel pretty refreshing, does feel pretty legit. I originally thought in my kind of early impressions and everything else that a lot of the reactions were based off of stuff that you said. Unfortunately, yeah, a lot of that is just generic, I agree, I don't agree kind of stuff. Anyway, moving on here, this is the bit where that lady managed to save the people's crops instantly by entirely flooding the fields, but whatever. Weird line, but alright, whatever. one of like 3 cases of somebody cussing in this story, which is kind of funny. And this is when everybody became drug dealers. So my first this was before that. So first playthrough of the game, I wanted to derail the plot as much as possible. So I went over to the Snow Russians over there, hoping to deal with that whole situation before it happened. Unfortunately, you can't tilt that in any direction. It really doesn't matter. Your first decision in the game basically is just which place would you like to go see. You don't really get anything extra from it aside from flavor. Technically, the Byzantine side is a little bit easier, but whatever. Personally, I prefer the snowy side. but it is what it is. Then after that, once everybody starts invading all over the place, you kind of have an option of like, do you save your dude? Do you protect your dude? Do you accept, proposals from this, that, or the other? And more or less what I was doing was just like, no, we're going to sit here, we're going to fight every single frickin' faction in the game and see what happens. And they let you do that. And it's funny because they keep hand-waving it, and they keep trying to be like, no, but everyone's tired and hungry, and we don't have anything anymore. And it's like, no. You allow me to infinitely restart fights with infinitely respawning units. We are going to be stubborn about this. So anyways, yeah, that's basically what we did. It's like fight after fight after fight in the same spot, just different parts of that same castle. That was pretty cool to at least have the option. After a certain point, they basically tell you, okay, fine, look, screw it, you got to go progress the plot at some point. It's time to move on, and so you get an option of like, do you turn in the guy that wants you to be smugglers, or do you do the smuggling? So we went and did the smuggling, and then you wind up with a fight there, and it's not a very good fight, but whatever. It's in the rain, it looks cool. You basically just hold up in this little choke point in the center and watch everybody run into traps repeatedly for half an hour. And yeah, then was doing some extra side fights. This was pretty cool, though, because after that section, and you may notice initially, I was trying to skip spoilers when going and taking screenshots, but ultimately changed my mind. I did actually like going down this particular route first time through. You get a choice over whether or not to make an alliance with the guy at the base. Now, again, I actually kind of had two things going into this particular one, because I wanted, if there was a Night of Lotus ending, I wanted to get it. And so what I did was like, okay, if there's an option to derail the plot and like avoid the war situation as much as possible, or just stubbornly hold out, go for that. And if the wife character suggests something, assume they're correct, right? So that's what I was going for. And for this one, they're like, no, it's my relative, I can totally talk to them, it's gonna work. And it turns out they suck in negotiating, and then they start talking, they get like one line in, and they're like, yeah, no, I don't even want to talk to you, and then you leave. It was kind of funny, but then you get to fight in a death pit, so that's kind of cool. You basically just like shove everybody off into the spike pits at the bottom. Disappointingly, despite the fact this map gets reused several times in the mock fights, you don't get the pits, and I don't know why, because the pits are kind of what makes this fight cool, but whatever. This is the only time you get to use this particular one, and one of the few times you actually get to make use of throwing people off of stuff, which is always fun. Alright, and then, just because reasons, you suddenly get paid way more than you were originally supposed to get, because that's just totally a thing that seedy underground places do. I may have noticed at this point, Wimpy Prince guy has taken on the guise of his mentor. Again, the two are supposed to be very, very close characters. They never talk at all. Anyway. So then that happens, and then they got shiny walls, and they couldn't really bother to model them anywhere past this point. Then some dude gets stabbed, and naturally, as they do, they invite somebody from a completely different country that they were kind of thinking about invading, and decide to make them a, one of the top people in the country. Sure. It does kind of make sense in context later, but, like, in this particular series of events, it felt hilarious. Because they're like, okay, so we tried invading you, we tried taking a bunch of people from you, you just had like 4 or 5 different factions try to invade at the same time, and then yeah, you did a bunch of crimes against our country here, so time to get promoted to a like senator, more or less. How does that sound? Again, it makes more sense on the other routes. You know that moment in if you've played Tactics Ogre, that like the Cashua moment, the idiot ball moment of just like, okay, seriously, we got to get the plot going at some point. She's got to go leave, and she's got to go make that alliance in the background. It feels like every other decision has that, where a lot of them either don't matter, or you're gonna end up doing X, Y, or Z, whether you want to or not. I forgot what I was going to with that picture. Yeah, this fight felt dumb, because at this point, what I was thinking, like the way that the plot goes, you have a bunch of these red-haired guys. They're basically refugees in your little, domain area. Everyone calls it dements, but basically it's just a weird way of saying domain, right? So the deal is, the blue guys. So the red guys are just invading because, well, they find out that there's a bunch of salt. So the deal with the salt is there's one place that has it, and it's the blue guys, and they sell it for way too much. Now, this story became unusually immersive for me personally because we had just started a 900-calorie diet before this whole thing, and suddenly spices became very appreciated, especially salt on stuff. But either way, you need it for preserving stuff, you need it for making stuff. Like, you need salt for a lot of things. It actually is something that people have gone to war for in the past, even though right now it's like, hee hee ha ha, go to McDonald's, get some salt packets. But, like, way back when, the whole deal, one of the things that Gandhi did was show people how to get salt from the ocean as kind of a big symbolic gesture, So, just something to consider for the context of this whole thing. But the whole deal is, so it's only the blue guys, the religious guys, that have just this big old lake of this stuff, and they're selling it for way too much. They're all three of the countries get together. They're making they do like a joint mining venture, and they accidentally find that there's a crap load of it underground, but only one guy knows about this. So he keeps it a secret. He tries to get himself a promotion for discovering it, and gets shot instead. At that point, the red guys invade, because they figure that's way easier than just giving the guy a promotion. And they leave his dad in charge of defense in their own country. That becomes relevant later. When you go back doing the whole, illegal trading thing there, that's when you run into that guy, and that's when you have a choice of, like, do you reveal the fact that this prince guy is under an assumed identity and still alive, or do you just sort of try to negotiate some other way, which doesn't work at all, and then you get to go fight in a death pit. Anyways, so at that point, later on, you go back, and at this point, the yellow guys, so your guys' faction, don't really know what's in the mine. All they know is the red guys attacked. The blue guys offer to help, and they basically say, okay, look, we'll help you, but you got to give us back our slaves, more or less. So that's these red-haired guys. So they're well, oppressing them, as you can pretty much assume from the title. Now, originally, there was going to be a choice there. Do you convince them to go willingly? Do you not do it at all? You have the option to defend them, you have the option to convince them, or the option to forcefully make them go. Now, originally, the option to... I should say originally there was the option to forcefully make them go. And in fact, this guy you see on the right with the spear, the prince guy apparently originally decapitated him in that particular route, but they took it out, and that's probably one of the 3 other village fights you get in the mock fights. Either way, the point being that, yeah, you end up with this awkward situation where, like, my opinion going into it in the first place was like, okay, there's an oppressed group here, there's a gigantic army over there that allegedly nobody can fight under any circumstances, so we go over there, you talk to them, and you tell them, hey, guys, so we're going to put you in with the other ones, you get that whole revolution thing brewing on from the inside, we sneak on in there, bada bing, bada boom, big old chaos, all well and good, right? It's a plan as good as any, because they point out several times, they're getting taken one way or the other. It's not a choice. It turns out it is a choice, actually, a very simple choice, because the actual fight to defend them is a lot easier than the fight to try to take them out of there. Anyway, my whole thing was like, yeah, they have the option to go talk to them to try to figure out some other way. You show up, somebody else is already attacking them, they don't want to listen to you, you fight them, they instantly regenerate their entire group in order to help you, then you fight everybody again, then they instantly regenerate their entire group again. Anyway, there was one character now. I haven't shown them in screenshots yet. This is the first one here. This guy on the left with the club. That guy annoyed me so much during my first run, because I have never seen somebody with so much freaking plot armor, and that's another thing. It's really inconsistent. I feel like originally this game was supposed to have as many deaths as something like Tactics Ogre does. But yeah, there's like no character deaths that happen throughout the majority of this whole thing. And that guy right there has been a boss like 5 or 6 times at this point. Every time that he gets down, he's like, "Oh, what a terrible way to die!" Oh. And then he just instantly respawns. And it's just like, what the hell is the deal? Why this guy? He's even in the outro to the ending I got. Like, dude, what the hell? Who likes this generic dude with club this much? Anyway, so yeah, as you can see, everybody's all beaten until they aren't, and then you have an annoying fight there. Oh yeah, then I was playing some Risk of Rain for a while. That was fun. I like Risk of Rain. Anyway, moving on. This particular fight took a while, but eventually I found out that, yeah, if you put a trap on top of the stairs, they gladly will repeatedly fall off. Then apparently my daughter was playing some Animal Crossing. Whatever. So yeah, you put trap on top of stairs, you wait until they run into it, and they fall off until they die. It's neat. It's actually a pretty cool map. You have a lot of verticality to it. You get a lot of cool things that are going on. I was very checked out of the story by this point, though, because like everything about this situation felt super stupid. Because you got this difficult fight that was completely avoidable, that like they send this guy here for practically no reason. Sometimes people will be there just because they felt like putting somebody in there. But see, right here. He's dying, but is better than living in shame, but then he'll be alive again in a cutscene later. They make fun of this guy over here for, being just this random politician that's, he's got no place here, but yet he's got more health than any of my tanks, and that kind of thing. Again, just hard mode problems on that one. Also, you get to see cover actually functioning here, that he's hiding behind the well, so that's pretty cool. And, man, these numbers feel so low after Hard Plus. Anyway. So, yeah, then this guy just leaves. And they're asking if they can kill him, but no, that's fine. He's been a boss so many other times, but it's fine, just let him go, whatever. Yeah, then you go back, and they're like, well, I guess you just get a gigantic army now. This also threw me for a loop. This scene right here. Because again, bear in mind, the only reason that any of that stuff was happening, the only reason that they were pressed into a corner to help with the whole smuggling thing in the first place, is because, according to cutscenes, they had no army left. It was, like, literally just whoever was barely left over from about, 5 different massive attacks in a row from different groups. It was the entire map versus this one castle, more or less. Which, again, nobody ever bothers to use their walls because it's an SRPG. I think Ogre Battle is the only time that actually happens. So, oh well. It would be really cool to see one of these fights where they're just like, okay, you have the option to open the gates, or you can just fire at them with your archers. And then you just do nothing but fire, because why would you open that gate? I think Meko's story did that, actually, now that I think about it. Anyway, so yeah, and then at this point they're just like, yeah, so why don't you go ahead and use your army to go lead our army? And so that's exactly what they do, and then they give you a magical nuke, because that's just a thing they have. And yeah, then you got the usual of people talking out loud to say what they're doing instead of just doing it. Talk instead of show. Definitely a lot of that going on. And although halfway through the game, you do suddenly start getting 3 options instead, so that's kind of neat. Some of these fights start getting a little bit more interesting, like this one here, where you had to you had to take your leader and their 2 bodyguards out of enemy lines, more or less, but you could also just teleport them out of there. Oh, this is what I was showing, was basically just Clotho, the giant blue dragon. That's pretty cool. This one became a frickin' meme, and I love it. Because after a certain point, every time that there's an option with Benedict in there, it seems like all the guy can do is think of war crimes. So they're like, well, we have this like control of the biggest army in the continent, and we have this magical nuke thing, and so it's like, go use a bunch of passages to go in and just deal with their leadership, right? You're going back to retake the capital, so it's like, go take out all the leaders and whatever else, and then just kind of blow up their boat so they can't escape, so that everybody's in chaos and just gives up, or blow up the bridge, preventing anybody from escaping, and trap everybody inside the castle. Okay, both of those are options. What's this guy's idea? Why don't we just go flood a nearby city? And it's like the logic is supposed to be it overfills the water and then just the entire city gets washed out. But it's like you're basically wiping out two cities. I think we might be able to agree that that's a bit of a stupid plan. But whatever. I'm assuming it just skips the fight or something, so that's probably going to be the speedrun route. And then you get White Monk Lady. She evades things. That's neat. You can tell I'm kind of running out of steam here, because I'll be honest, this game's kind of exhausting after a certain point. As much as it's got cool features and cool ideas every now and then, I did repeatedly end up just leaving to go play Fell Seal or some XCOM 2 or some Tactics Ogre or just go clean the basement. Because yeah, the pace of it is very exhausting after a while. There's no downtime. Like, again, taking Fell Seal as an example, you know, going through your skills, readjusting your items, whatever else. Same thing for Tactics Ogre. You know, experimenting with your builds, that is your downtime there. It helps process the different fights and whatever else. These ones, it's just like, talk. Okay, now you have a search segment. Now it's like, okay, now immediately, a fight that's going to take you multiple tries to get through. And, by the way, can't ram people off this bridge because there's nothing underneath. You'd think they would have solved this problem sometime in the last few decades, but no. Apparently we still can't get past this little hurdle. XCOM 2 is the only one that's actually figured out just blasting somebody through a wall. So, Anyway. So, yeah, this was kind of an interesting fight. You're surrounded with two different groups, and they got all kinds of different mixed units and whatever else. And then, you know what you can just do? Yeah, you can make fun of the stupid AI as they get stuck in the middle of the bridge, wondering what's going on, as you just repeatedly snipe sleeping units over and over to put them back to sleep, or have this guy run in and out of the bottom of the bridge, cut somebody, and run back down. Yeah, this old man with his cane and his robe, just taking out an army, sure, whatever. And yeah, then you get the peaceful resolution. Don't worry, that never comes up again, because almost no choices have long-lasting consequences. It's just in the moment. I saw somebody describing Twin Peaks a while ago, and I feel like it's really fitting for this game too, where it's not really logical. No part of this game is really logical, but it does make emotional logic sense, if that makes sense. It's like it's literally just there for the feeling in the moment, but the long term isn't really there. You do get some other cool mock fights at this point, like this one right here, where if you just push everybody out of the square on the other end of the map, you win, so that was kind of fun. You get some fights here, for example, where you're pulling onto a boat, you're constantly getting new mechanics. Again, feels very, very Vandal Hearts in that regard. You can't push people off a boat. Again, boo. This part made me facepalm, because I saw the sudden 13 character stories, and I was like, I don't care. I don't want this, but there might be a new character in that pile somewhere, and maybe something happens if you watch them all. And then it was just like a torrent of cringe just pouring right out of that little box there. I hated that part. Again, weird that I'm actually really positive about this game, but yeah, those side stories are something appallingly badly written for the most part. This map was fun. You can warp somebody into the center of a bunch of wizards and have them get stabbed repeatedly, but they're all facing outwards, so you can just have them go back into hiding, so that's fun. Stuff happens, and then they're gonna go for the trope of, no, wife can't cook. Oh no, my Asian sensibilities. And, it just brought to mind a thing that my wife told me once. This is like, I think it was like a birthday or something like that, and somebody was joking like, oh, are you gonna go make him some for his birthday? I was like, oh, no, he's my food, bitch. We're gonna go get something to eat instead. was like, you know what? That works. That works. Again, it's weird because for the most part, it's a pretty reasonable thing between these two, but this food plot line was a little bit tropey, but oh well. This is one of those moments that I mentioned that I don't know when the scout has any time to do anything else because she's busy finding people's long lost relatives and husbands and things, just kind of because. By the way, they are implied to go bang in the woods after this. That's a little bit hilarious. Moving on. This guy's still talking about stopping somebody months ago, but whatever. Yeah, these guys' two cutscenes basically just involve them shooting bandits in the middle of the night. This guy heals some people, yada yada yada. Oh yeah, the cats. Apparently you do actually get something for talking with all the cats. You get something called the Cat Chronicles. Apparently I haven't found all the cats. Let's see. Yeah, stuff happens, spin moves happen, blah 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 blah, upgrades. Stuff goes on fire, oil mechanics that really don't get used as often as they should, more chess pieces moving around, this guy getting upgrades, I forget what I was talking about that. This fight was really cool, actually. You got a bunch of units, like, basically dropping bombs all over the mine, and if one goes off, you lose. But you have people, like, riding mine carts over each other and everything else. It's just a really cool fight. But I think they get something to the tune of like 40 to 50 units that you got to deal with, and so you're just like traveling along this mine in small squads and, you know, dealing with all of them as they come. Very, very cool moment. And yeah, then we get to the first ending here, where apparently old guy is so mad about the fact that we're going to go ahead and end slavery instead of dealing with any of this war crap that he decides to go for a fight. Oh yeah, apparently it was so non-consequential that I didn't even bother taking any pictures of it. So, funny thing is, like, they have a dramatic idle animation sword fight, and this is another one of those times where you could feel the cut corners all over the place, because every time there's a cutscene, they're just like, they're using a bunch of idle animations and you know, flashes and background noises and fades to black and stuff like that. There's a very noticeable lack of animations for some reason. Again, to the point where, like, at times I was like, I'm pretty sure Felseal did more than this. Like, what's happening here? Apparently, you were actually originally supposed to have an actual fight here, which might be why they redid it. But depending on your final choices, you wind up with one of your characters deciding to fight your main character. So you can guess about how well that goes, although, reasonably speaking, he would beat Benedict, no trouble. He would probably beat Roland, no trouble, because the guy's a glass cannon. I think he would actually lose to his wife, though. As Freddy the Hot Nuke is kind of one of the biggest damage dealers on the team, so I don't know about that one, but whatever. Anyway. But yeah, that's her big exploding move. It looks cool, but it doesn't really do much more than her basic fire move. This was the fight that probably gave me the most trouble in that first run. Just, yeah, this same character, except you fight her in a different spot. Kind of, her fight kind of reminded me of Zabos from Tactics Ogre. It's like if she was a wizard, or if he was a wizard, basically. Mostly because her moves are kind of weird. Like, one of them is basically Future Sight from Pokemon. The other move is, it says slow, but like it's like a 90% chance to kill move. And then you got another one that's just stopping somebody in place forever. Anywho, so after all of that, you know, went grinding for a bit, went trying all kinds of different things, and then I discovered the joy that is Armor Bird. So that's that dude over there with the shield, the one on the left. And I call them an APC. They don't really do damage. Their move to annoy people is pretty basic. But their kind of main claim to fame, and the weird... It's kind of weird that you have to upgrade them all the way to even get it, is they get the equivalent of Guardian Force, except without any kind of self-damage penalty from Tactics Ogre there, where... it's like kind of like a combination of Phalanx and Guardian Force. where they give a massive damage resistance buff to everybody in the 9 tiles around them. Well, the 8 tiles around them. And so this means that you just surround him with units. So you have this guy running around trying to get the entire front line annoyed. You have everybody else circling around the armor bird and then just standing in a formation, and that feels cool. That was a legitimately cool moment. And then after that, yeah, I gotta love the sheer lunacy of the plan that they come up with for this one. Because the pink ending plan is basically, okay, the red guys and the blue guys, they want to fight it out in one giant fight. The yellow guys are in the middle. They can't win unless they side with one of the other ones. And then your kind of other option is like, well, we figured out that the pink guys have a hidden, just island location somewhere that they can run off to. Maybe we should just do that. So it's just basically screw this war and leave. Very Suikoden on that one, by the way. It really made me think of the Suikoden. Anyway, so yeah, their whole plan is basically they make a deal with a bunch of merchants who it's really unclear why they would side with them, because in all the other cases where the merchants end up siding with somebody, they basically say, okay, look, will everybody getting equal access to these different trading opportunities is going to be pretty good for us, so we'll go ahead and help you out. In the pink ending, it didn't make any sense, because they're like, we've had nothing to do with each other so far, but I guess we'll just sort of sneak you into this giant enemy capital. Why not? And they do that. And once they just sort of immediately get caught and then run away. And so their plan is, okay, we have no idea how the magical nukes work from before, but we're just going to go find some of those, figure out how they work, convince everybody to do a riot because those people that we put in here before apparently couldn't be bothered to do anything up to this point. And then, yeah, then everybody's gonna break out of here and hop on a boat and go visit Narnia or wherever the hell they friggin' live. And so, yeah, it's very, very cringily written. Like, every part of it is just, the entire thing's a pipe dream. Like, there's no way in hell any part of that would ever work. Because it's like the equivalent of somebody going and knocking on the Great Wall, being like, hey, guess what? I've got some, like, baskets of Mrs. Dash to sell. Can I come in here? Yeah, no, sounds legit. Let's just go ahead and open the door. Wait a minute. We should probably check what's in there, huh? And then they get stabbed. But, by that point, they've already opened the gigantic gate. So everybody goes in, and they find the, pretty much the equivalent of, like, that country's Pentagon, more or less, and then they go in and they find all this magical nonsense, but they can't figure out how it works until the lead researcher just sort of shows up and then dies and drops the instruction manual on how to use their magical nuke things. You'd think they would have given up, moved on to another step, because destroying all the rest of the boats isn't really as important of a thing in the whole scheme of this plan, but whatever. They need to blow up the other boats except for theirs. And so they show up, and no one wants to participate in the thing initially. So they go ahead and they blow up the statue thing. They fight off one of the armies there, somehow with that army they don't have, and yeah, at that point they've left the tactician guy in charge of the yellow faction at this point, by the way. And yeah, after all this, they finally decide, okay, I guess we want to leave slavery now. And so they do. And I kid you not, I thought I took a screenshot of this. This frickin' guy follows you all the way across the map on magical salt horses, which weren't a thing up to this point until they are now. They are apparently a thing in other routes, but just suddenly they just fart out a bunch of magical robots, and yeah, they're just here now. So you can have a boss fight at Zyrkyle Falls. Now, unlike Zyrkyle Falls, or, any of the other equivalents, you can't push people off this bridge. This looks like a bridge you'd be able to push some people off, but no, they couldn't be bothered to program those tiles at the bottom, so that's not going to happen. So he stabs him with his idle animation. Oh, dang. And yeah, the guy that's literally able to turn invincible is told that he is not allowed to take his place. Everyone goes all DBZ for some reason. Again, I was pretty sure I took a screenshot of him glowing blue. Your main character does glow blue. it's strange because they used this blocking animation once for a sword fight earlier, and then they reuse it here, but then for the actual final scene, they just have him in his, like, standing animation. And then, yeah, your strategist guy ends up defecting to the red guys anyway, and everyone ends up fighting forever, but hey, your pink people ended up over here, and also your main character got exploded because the Pope went nuclear on him. That's an ending, I guess. Or something. I don't know. It was weird. It was very, very strange. Also, the art in this cutscene reminds me of Link's Awakening. Any darn ways, then New Game Plus happens, so, you know, that's neat. And so yeah, you get all kinds of new side fights, and that felt very FFTA 2 in that regard. Like fights where you pulled out 100 rounds and such, and so visited the blue people early that time. Not really much new happened, to be honest, but we got this blue guy instead. I seriously feel like it just deleted every other screenshot I took, what the hell. But then we got this map with its pulley systems taking place, so that happens, except one of the pulleys is broken, and I thought you could talk to all your characters and have them fix it, because they make this whole thing of, like, tell us which pulleys are broken and we'll totally fix them, and during these exploration segments, there's a lot of cases where you'll go back and, you know, there's just little things that you can change about the map, so that's cool. I would have thought this would have been one of them, but apparently not. But yeah, you always get to explore your map before you have a fight there, so that's cool. So this time, yeah, there was just the option to just make an alliance with the red guys and immediately backstab them, so that seemed like something interesting. So we did that. This was actually a pretty cool fight at the pier, and you could set up a bunch of traps, and you fight one of your... you still fight the same boss, but you get a way easier map to do it on, and you get a few helpers. And then you still just kind of wind up doing the same things anyway, because the same people show up to threaten you anyway, show up with the same offer for you to go be their smugglers anyway. The only reason that we're fighting in a corn or in a wheat field earlier back here is because in exchange for giving up the prince guy, you're supposed to go and you're ordered to go take these guys out, and you're told that you have the option to talk to them. Then they just don't want to talk to you, and everyone fights for no reason. Actually, it's one of those characters that's it feels like he's intentionally written to the leader of that faction feels like he's intentionally written to be a complete dipshit. And I actually am starting to love the story at this point again. Like, I was completely checked out after the first playthrough, but by this point, getting these different perspectives on it, I started appreciating it again. And the reason being, because yeah, when you start seeing these other factions and what they were up to at the same time, you start getting what the actual idea is of the story. The story doesn't matter. The feelings of the story do. The implications of the story do. So for example, you start noticing every one of the, like, leaders that's held up as this, you know, paragon of this, that, or the other throughout the whole story is an idiot. Like, the entire story ends up revolving around whether or not the new cast that's repeatedly trying to live up to these, you know, big heroes from their past are going to end up doing that. And the only way that you actually end up getting the, you know, quote-unquote perfect ending of the thing is to get everybody in your group away from that particular route. Like, if you end up defending these guys, you end up finding out about, you know, the Pink Wonderland early. So you end up finding out about the whole, you know, there's more salt underground conspiracy early. If you end up going... Well, actually, interestingly enough, the way you take the capital doesn't really matter. And also you get promoted to a leader of this gigantic country no matter what you do. Again, feels very weird, considering you can betray them multiple times. Anyway, by the way, this was another map that you could just sit here and cheese with AoE abilities. Just forever. Anyway. Yeah, you know, their explodey thing apparently made this metal boat implode. Why not? This fight was pretty cool. It's in a big old courtyard thing. You got a bunch of little holdout areas. Pretty much no matter what you do, you end up having Alvora quote-unquote killed off here. Literally every character that can be a party member that gets killed off just comes back later. Anyway, so in her case, Somehow she loses to the most glass cannon unit in the team. He, again with the missing screenshots here, but just ends up magically dodging her super move. Sure. And okay. So kind of what this boils down to at this point is, yeah, because the pink route was discovered early, main character's wife is suddenly more open to other ideas, and or her whole route is discovered early. Prince guy's route is to give up to the blue guys just outright. So that all ties into the same thing, that their religion is a lie there. So if that gets exposed early, his route is discovered early. The last one is to side with the red guys and just basically give up to them instead, which somehow this is supposed to tie into to that one, because it just revolves around that guy getting assassinated, which somehow discovers the red guys being the bad guys thing early for reasons. It was a totally unaffiliated group that did all this stuff, but either way, he finds out the same information whatever route you're on, wherein your main character finds out he's the king after all. It's just whether or not he wants to be the king. Anyway, though, this was pretty dumb, though, because then you go back and you rediscover the pink route ending, like a few scenes later, and it's just like, why is everyone shocked? This is the same information we already discussed a few scenes ago, so it just feels really janky there. This was another scene right here where, like, this guy is asking about his daughter, who very well can just be in your own camp at that point. If you completely skip the information about being able to burn down your own town, you're just given that information. But this right here is a really solid way to actually cap it all off. Because at this point, if you've discovered all the endings early, like, you can technically do this on your first playthrough of the game, but if you discover all the endings early, then he actually stops to think for a second and then realizes, wait, maybe we shouldn't vote on everything. And so finally just decides to throw away one of the game's core gimmicks. and yeah, then it just all catches fire, and he's like, well, I guess this isn't a fire hazard. I guess we're gonna go have multiple wars at one time, at which point she comes back to life. Because reasons. Like, regardless of what route you took, somebody comes back to life at this point. Apparently, I don't remember how else they went. Either way, you get either Max or Elvora at this point. It's kind of whatever. This was a cool mechanic that they should have used more often, where you split the party, they go off in different directions. This would have made a lot more sense at different parts of the story, and would explain a lot of the mock battle stuff as far as the kinds of situations that wind up there. But you don't get to do that. This is a one-time thing. So then you split the party. He ends up defending the castle. Actually, in the pink ending, he ends up putting up a bunch of straw people and just pulling a Vlad the Impaler on everybody. Yeah, I think that was Vlad the Impaler that just put up a bunch of straw people. He ends up going to do the negotiation thing. They all end up getting in the merchant cart, and yeah, everyone goes off to their respective endings. This fight was actually really cool in this version. The original version that you can do in the game, I kind of found to be a little bit dumb, but this one felt a lot better because the blue guys are way bigger of a threat. Suddenly this guy gets arrested because of reasons, and blah 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 blah. You find some letters that try to awkwardly explain some stuff. That dude gets thrown off a wall. Then you fight Dracula in the snow, so that's cool. You can kind of see at this point, like, none of this stuff feels connected, really. Like, once you get into the golden ending, that's when you start seeing, like, some characters actually start having dialogue with people they should have dialogue with again. It felt really bizarre to see so many cases where there just was no dialogue between people. And this, by the way, shows you right here, like, even the big flashy super moves and stuff like that, you're not doing very much in the end game. But yeah, these pink guys, they literally will do absolutely nothing unless they're on this route. So, whatever. It is what it is, I suppose. Same stuff happens over here as last time, except it's slightly different, I guess. This poor guy over here, I forget his friggin' name, but he shows up in a bunch of cutscenes. He doesn't even get the dignity of an actual fight. He just gets killed off screen by the pitchfork mob. For some reason, that lady's backstory, she's afraid of war crimes that she did, and then finds out she just didn't do any. That's not a cop-out or anything. But yeah. You know, again, Golden Route does have a bunch of really cool fights and set pieces and things like that. And really, the game does set pieces and the actual battles themselves really well. The writing is just so frickin' spotty, it's ridiculous. Also, yeah, for some reason, this lady is always trying to get in your main character's pants. One quick sec, let's go back to the game itself. Now look, all this stuff being said, you might be thinking, like, this song was a pretty negative take on all this stuff. Like, are you sure you want to recommend it even? And it's like, the thing is, it's still a really solid thing overall. It's very hit or miss. Very, very hit or miss all over the dang place. But you can tell it was made with love and everything else. Personally, I would say maybe wait until it goes on sale, but it's a Square game, so I'll see you in 10 years for that one. Like, overall value prospect wise, if you're doing okay financially, then yeah, it's something that would really support the genre for sure. But if you're really just, it's definitely not even the best thing on the system, I would say. Like, it would depend on what you're looking for. Like, if you really like, choice and story and whatever else, honestly, Banner Saga did it way better. You got Wildermyth that's coming out. That does it really well. But just overall, like, the story is more of a vehicle than it actually is a core selling point, I would argue. Which, again, feels very strange because the whole concept of this thing was that it was originally not supposed to even have gameplay. It was just a choose-your-own-adventure type deal. Which, yeah, if they made it a bit differently, I could actually see that somewhat working. Which, by the way, I didn't discuss this whole system earlier. Don't worry, this spoiler review isn't disjointed whatsoever. I don't know what you're talking about. But like, you really don't get a lot of uses of this thing. It feels pretty solid. It feels like there definitely was supposed to be more stuff in this menu, though. Like, it is kind of all over the place. Like, you got guaranteed crit, you can make somebody miss a turn, teleport somebody 8 tiles, revive at 25% health, or revive at full health, swap out a character. I've never once found this useful. Instant turn, faster movement for everybody for 1 turn, instant recharge on TP, or an instant heal and status restoral. And it feels like there should be more stuff in there, like a defense boost or something, Either way. Just ultimately, like, okay, if you like the sort of like character-driven strategy or whatever else, I feel like SteamWorld Heist did it better, as strange as that sounds. If you like customization, you'll find none of it here, but Felseal did that amazingly. Personally, it's still my favorite SRPG on the system. Like, if we're just talking Switch here, I'm sure this will get a PC port eventually, but, music-wise, it's weird because there's like 2 or 3 good tracks and the rest are standard anime orchestra nonsense. It's good. It just could be a lot better. Anyway, you might be able to hear dogs going crazy in the background, so I gotta get going. Have a good one. And take care.